We are families, we are caregivers, we are parents to children with disabilities and medical complexities. We are rarely familiar. We get together to learn, to relate, and to laugh a lot while we share each other's unique family experiences of raising the rarest of the rare. Our goal is to unite, inspire, educate, and empower people living a rarely familiar life. And we're so glad you're here.
Hi, welcome to Rarely Familiar. This is Jen here with my friends Tram and Haley, where we dig into the realities of raising the rarest of the rare. Today, we are going to get familiar with building a financial plan for families like ours with kids with complex needs. And so before we begin, let's do our little check-in. Can I just start with saying that this has been one of those days where I feel like Jennifer Aniston on The Daily Show, and she's back in the green room, and they're saying, you've got 20 seconds to get on set. And, it's just like everything's just crazy and chaotic. And I'm running to the stage and we sit down and then there's technical difficulties. It's kind of one of those days for me. So, but I'm here. I feel good. I feel centered and grounded now. I'm ready. I'm excited for the show.
Collective, deep breath in. We need to start.
I'm telling you, I gave a talk last night for work. We had a residency and my co-presenter is a psychologist. And so she started off the whole presentation. She said, okay, everybody stand up. We're going to do the 4-7-8 breathing technique. Have you guys heard of that?
Remember, I'm a yoga teacher.
But just let me say, you breathe in for 4, you hold for 7, you breathe out for 8. And holding for 7 is kind of hard. At first, you're like, wow, I can't do this. But anyways, we did it 3 times and everybody has their eyes closed and we're like, okay, we're in a peaceful space now. It really
Central nervous system, it's calm and relaxed.
Yes.
Ready to listen.
Yeah. How are you two? What's new?
Haley, you have some good news, don't you?
Well, it's just kind of fun news, right? I came home and in my driveway was a book from Corey Lee. And if anybody knows him, Herb Free with Corey Lee, he wrote a children's book about traveling the world in a wheelchair. And I just thought I'm so happy. And to come home to that was amazing because I too had another big presentation at the Advanced Practice Providers Conference on Monday, telling my story and introducing family engagement in research to a bunch of complex care providers. So it's been a big week with a lot of stuff going on. And I was really happy to get this book. I think it's awesome. If any follows Curb Free with Corey Lee on Instagram, I think Trum told me about him first.
Yeah, you told us about him, Trum. He's cool. Yeah. Have you showed it to Felix yet? Is he excited to read it?
Oh, he loves it.
Yeah, sure. Great.
Yeah, so Curb Free with Corey Lee, but he's a full wheelchair user and he was told he could never have a career doing travel. And so he's defied everybody and he gives all these amazing helpful hints about traveling in a wheelchair across different continents. He is awesome.
Don't tell us we can't do something. Going to force us to figure out a way.
Right.
Totally. Good. That's exciting.
My question is who pays for all the travel? How do they? I'm sure I don't know.
He's an influencer now.
Right?
So he's a huge influencer.
I love it. I love it.
Yeah.
We should. Absolutely. That's where our money should be going.
Well, we have a wonderful guest today. Her name is Genevieve Cornish. And Genevieve is a financial representative at Northwestern Mutual. Your mission is to provide lifelong financial planning support to special needs families and the loved ones, providers, and entrepreneurs that serve the special needs community. Your goal is to gain a deep understanding of each family's journey and what they want the future to look like for their loved ones with special needs. And you are a mom to a neurodivergent son, teenager, and you have another son, and you're married, and it sounds like you have a very busy life.
Oh my gosh.
And
yes.
I guess our first question we ask a guest is, what is your tie-in to the disability community?
Yeah, it's personal, right? So Devin is 15 now, my neurodivergent son, and we thought he had autism when he was little. He had very, very big behaviors, very rigid, lots of fairness, lots of dysregulation, and ability to transition between all the kind of behavioral classic signs. And when we finally got him a full neuropsych eval after sitting on wait lists for a long time, He was actually diagnosed with something called disruptive mood dysregulation disorder and ADHD, which in the DSM was only a diagnosable term as of 2015. So it was a newer one that was more of a mood disorder that contributed similar challenges and behaviors. So that's our tie-in.
And how long did it take to find that diagnosis? Because I know with my own son, it took us 8 years of searching. So was
Yeah.
it also a long journey for you to get to that point where you're like, okay, this is what it is?
Yes. And we're still not totally sure if that is
Okay.
what it is. So when he was going into kindergarten, we had the best Montessori teacher who told us that he probably wasn't going to be welcome back for their kindergarten program. And it was the first time we heard about early childhood special education. I was 24 when I had him. I was very young. I had no friends who were raising a child that was on a unique journey. Most of them still didn't have kids. And so we relied a lot on the professionals around us to tell us what we didn't know. And we had a short intake into school and they diagnosed him just with ADHD. But the interventions were not working. And we had very large behaviors that escalated all the way into fourth grade when we finally got our official diagnosis through the Masonic Institute for the Developing Brain. And that was the 2-day full neuropsych eval. And that's where they came back with that. So it is evolving because it's considered a mental health condition and it's not super clear cut, which they're so typical in some ways and so atypical in other ways. So we have continued to just monitor and watch and go back for additional health care as needed during his journey.
Yeah. And I think our main experience is with physical disabilities or obvious disabilities, right? But I think when you talk about the disability community as a whole, you're talking about both visible and invisible. And I think we're just starting to, and certainly I know we're getting a neuropsych eval for Felix in June. We're just starting to dip our toe into this world because the physical things are starting to hit sort of that maintenance mode. And as he's getting bigger and stronger, we're starting to realize, oh, actually, he has some neurodivergence himself. And I think with a lot of these rare conditions that our kids have, depending on their cognitive ability, there are also some hidden disabilities too. So it's really good to talk to you and start to dip our toe into that community, because I think it's something that I certainly have overlooked and not been as aware of and educated on as I should.
Genevieve, how old is Devin now?
15.
15. So he got diagnosed at, did you say 8?
Yes.
Yes. So during this time, I think the hardest part about being a parent with all these different medical complexities is that have you found anybody else with similar or in that umbrella of the same diagnoses that he has so that you have somebody to talk to?
You know, I don't know anybody else with the same diagnoses. But what I have found as a parent and going to parent retreats and building a fierce network of other moms going through it is there is a uniqueness to each of our kids' journeys, regardless of the diagnosis, even if it's autism, right? If it's then that diagnosis, it's such a wide spectrum. But I find that there is a shared community just being a parent of any child with a disability because we are fierce advocates. We feel a sense of loneliness, or in the beginning, you feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not going to be good enough to do this. And I find it just so uniting. It's like a special community, regardless of the diagnosis, because there are some emotional components of being a parent that are consistent for us, regardless of what our kids are going through. And then there's the uniqueness of what our kids are going through. And if it's medical complexity, it's even more challenging because you want to find the very best doctors to treat the body.
Yeah. No, the reason I ask is your story does show others. So I think you may relate to this. We all have our moments we're in survival mode. We're barely treading water. We're Googling late at night. And then we're trying to get our kids to try and excel in the world that they can excel in. And so I think what your story represents is you found a new career path, and now you're creating the strength to build community to help others through this journey. So we can get into the crux of why we brought you here is that financial services and the things that you can provide to help families. Because when we get to the moment of where we can breathe and think, oh my gosh, I've got to start planning for the future for our kids, I think that's an amazing part. So thank you for being on our show.
Oh, thank you so
Yeah.
much for having me. And that's my mission in life, is to use our mess to bless. And a small slice of the world where I know how to do that is around helping with the finances, because I know what that's like to want to kick that can down the road, because every day feels like chaos and you can only look a couple inches in front of your face in the beginning. And I've built such a vast network of other resources over the 15 years that I bring into the relationships with my clients, because I find that connection and that access to resources just so important.
Sure.
I just want to tie in. We met you, Genevieve, last week, us three, at the Empowering Special Needs Families Luncheon at the Mendakota Country Club. And you had a panelists from all different areas, and we learned a ton. And so it was perfect timing to be doing the show a week later, because I think some of the questions that we are going to ask you today, you filled in a little bit of that. And now we want to share that with our listeners. So, Tram, you want to jump in?
Yep. Genevieve, could you tell us what you do at Northwestern and how you help families like ours?
So I work as a financial planner, and my clients are often families raising a child with a disability. They're family members, they're neighbors, business owners, healthcare professionals serving the community. But the practice as a whole was built to give back to the special needs community. So if you are a direct care provider for a loved one with a disability, navigate county benefits and government benefits and make sure that the way that you are saving money and that the family members around you are saving money will ensure that your child will have access to government benefits for as long as they need them on their journey. And that you can retire as well. Like, financial security for parents is sometimes the hardest thing for us to think about, because we are so focused on providing the care that we need for this unique journey that we're on. And I've had clients not even be able to think about what their retirement age is, because they haven't been able to back into what the number is going to be to care for their child throughout the remainder of their life. So they don't even know how to plan for their next step. And it's important to us that we make decision making really simple, and we partner with people over a long period of time, so that as life changes year to year and our families start to tell their stories and we go through nonlinear changes and the curveballs, we can make sure that our plans continue to evolve with that, so that you feel a sense of trust and security and one less thing you don't have to worry about.
Okay. So is your practice solely for families like ours, or just your specific area? And do you work with other families too? Or is it just special needs families?
I do work with other families. Everyone that I work with has some connection to the disability community, though. They have a cousin or a neighbor or somebody they babysat when they were growing up. And they
Okay.
tend to work with me and our team because they value working with a values-based organization that is giving back in the special needs community. I think what makes our practice unique is we don't have income or asset minimums to work with us. We work with families wherever they're at and help them build a plan to get where they're going. So I've even had the blessing of working with families who've been managing themselves to poverty in order to keep their children on supplemental security income benefits, because they weren't aware that there were other programs like TEFRA for medical assistance in Minnesota and certain waiver programs that then could replace that income stream in another way that could still support their family and allow the parents to be saving for vacations or their future or have a retirement plan. It's such a passion practice versus a wealth management practice,
Got
if
it.
that makes sense.
Yeah,
It's
so
amazing. Yeah.
can you explain, like, when you say your team, can you talk through the members in your team?
Yeah. So I work very closely with 3 experts that also have their own practices around the country. One is Tom Canale out of Chicago. He launched the special needs planning practice at Northwestern Mutual 25 years ago. Jess Manderfeld out of our Lake Elmo office, who was my panelist at our event last week. He
Okay.
is a board member at the Masonic Children's Hospital and has been doing special needs planning for 10 to 15 years. And then Missy Burback out of our Milwaukee office, who is also a special needs mother and has been doing some unique work for the last 20 years. And between all of us, my expertise is really around county benefits and insurance. That's what I bring in. And at this stage of my career, I think of myself as being in medical school as a resident, and they are my physician experts that come in and round out the services that my clients truly need. So they'll come in and handle deep investment analysis, tax work, understanding some of the withdrawal needs and funding of the trust needs that might be different in different tax brackets. So I do a lot of partnership with those 3 professionals.
So for someone who may just have had a child and they're just like in it and they get the diagnosis, what are the tidbits of information that they should know? So then when do they bring you into the picture to then start that financial planning?
You bet. I think one of the number one things is knowing who should be on your team of professionals, because not any one person has all the answers. And so there's 5 key roles based on licensing and education and their role in the journey of your family that you'll want to have a relationship with at some point in your journey. So the first one, and this sounds a little self-serving, I realize that, is a financial advisor, a financial planner that understands the special needs journey, because the planning is unique to keeping assets and dollars out of the disabled individual's name while they're under the age of 18 and over the age of 18. It changes. So they tend to become kind of the center of all the things that are going on in your family outside of your healthcare professional.
Right.
So the financial advisor has a key role. And the next is a really strong estate planning attorney that also has expertise in the special needs space, because they're going to understand things about putting in a trust. And a lot of people have heard the phrase special needs trust, but there's actually 2 kinds of trusts that get called special needs trusts, and they don't work the same and they have different rules. So your estate planning attorney will help you with things like guardianship and creating a trust and writing your will. And those are all things that should happen. A CPA or accountant that also understands the unique journey, because there's ways of maximizing your tax deduction. If you are getting certain government funds like PCA or parental pay, that has to be accounted for on your tax return and then backed out. There's different boxes you check when you're on that journey. So having an accountant who understands is important. And then there's something called a government benefits expert. And in Minnesota, sometimes your case manager through the county is really knowledgeable and they can serve that role for you. And sometimes you feel at a loss. And there are public organizations that staff experts in every state that you can hire to do government benefits reviews or write a care plan as you're transitioning to adulthood. They can, for a fee, serve a very specialized role if you're not getting the expertise that you need. And the last thing we recommend is partnering with your financial advisor and your attorney to select a corporate trustee for your trust once it's open.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. What is
So a
that?
lot
Tell
of
us
people,
more.
I feel like people hear wills and trusts and those might be familiar terms, or they might know somebody who has a trust and it's a family member who's the trustee on the trust, an uncle or a grandparent or a family. So what a corporate trustee is and why it's important when you have a supplemental needs trust or a special needs trust is they are typically a financial institution that's professional responsibility is to make sure that the funds are distributed in a way that meets the requirements of the trust and the requirements of the law, and that there are no mistakes.
Okay. Interesting.
Because these are highly regulated trusts on what funds can be used, can go into these accounts, and how they need to be distributed in order to protect the loved one with disabilities and their ability to continue to access government benefits.
So would the attorney then say, here's who I advise to be it or put it in the will? Because I had my will done years ago and
Yeah.
I was explaining that my son is disabled and I have another son and how do I do this? And she put in the will, well, this portion will go into a special needs trust that will be dispersed at your death. And that was like it. It was like a sentence or two. And I thought, well, but then what? How do we know what to do
Yeah.
with that? You know, it felt like really vague to me. And
Yeah.
that she maybe wasn't super tuned in or detailed enough for me to feel comfortable. So I probably have to visit that. But so would the attorney then find somebody or the institution or the corporate trustee and assign that name? Or how does that work?
That's a great question. Yes, the attorney may be aware of corporate trustees that they recommend. We have a list of pre-selected, pre-vetted corporate trustees as well that we recommend.
Okay.
And then you put that language that that's who's going to be the corporate trustee. But then if you do that when your child's only 4, we just keep checking in to make sure that they haven't been acquired. There wasn't a merger or acquisition between businesses, that they're still in business, right? So that may need to change over time because they don't technically start working for you until there is money in the trust. And a lot of these trusts are funded upon death or transfer of assets, a life insurance policy, something like that later on. So once the money is in the account, that's when the corporate trustee actually has a job, and that's when they start collecting a fee. So it's not free to have a corporate trustee. We often see around like 1% of whatever the assets are in the trust on average as an estimate of what they charge for their time. But they carry insurance, and if they make a mistake and something goes wrong, they're accountable, which is a lot more freeing for a lot of families than having a family member do it. And if they make a mistake, it can cause a lot of strife between family members.
Yeah.
I want to interject too, because I think we look at having a financial planner and hiring lawyers and things, and I see dollar signs, right? And there's quite a gap in our country between the income levels. And so it's like, what happens when you're right on the cusp of things? And I think disability does not discriminate in terms of income level. I think another big misconception is that if you're on Medicaid, that means you're in the low income. And no, that's not the case. We have to have Medicaid in order to get any of our services. So I think just speaking to not just the people that are very financially well off, but to our lower income families and people that have been forced into that because of the situation that they were in. And then everybody that falls in between. This is not an easy life, and it just sucks you dry financially, trying to give your kid everything they can possibly have to thrive. I just don't want people who feel like they're in that lower income bracket to feel like this conversation isn't for them.
Yeah, I have found there is a lot of emotion around money and where people are at financially. And there was an article from the University of Wisconsin and was published in AARP magazine back in 2023 or 2024. And they were talking about how special needs family are 25% behind their parenting typical peers at retirement. And the article went on to talk about the nuances that make it so unique for us. Like, we may step out of the workforce because the care needs are so high. We may not take a job promotion. If you remain married, there's a higher divorce rate. Plus, the expenses are so stinking high. And you have a lot of costs when you're trying to create the best environment possible for your loved one. There may be costs you take on or choose to take on that aren't covered by insurance. And those added expenses are really, really hard to bear for a lot of families. And then when you have typical life, like other children, or you have your own medical issues or something happens, life happens and it's nonlinear. You throw all that together and people carry a lot of emotions around what that means for them or their belief system around whether or not they're doing a good job or they're where they think they need to be in order to meet with a financial advisor. We like to strip all of that away and meet clients exactly where they are so that they can feel confident that they're gaining financial security in their life and able to take, they're like on a diet. I'm going to do one thing that's doable and I'm going to just drink more water every day. It's like, okay, what's that one thing that we can do that's doable?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do we take that next step?
What
That's
is that
doable?
first next step? What does the first call look like with your team? Do we call you directly? Like, what do we do?
Yes.
In my mind, Jen's got a will and everything figured out. Trum's, way further down. Like, sadly, I have not done those things. I don't think I've been in the emotional space to do that. I'm there now. I need to, and I realize it. But talk to me because I'm like at ground zero.
Yeah. Well, first, let me just make you feel okay that your financial advisor's office is an okay place to cry.
Yeah. Yes. Yes.
It's okay to cry and let it out in that space because it is a lot. And navigating it is quite, I don't have the word. It's so much I don't have the word, right? And people come at it from different levels. Some are really confident in what they're doing. Some have never started. Some feel like they should have started years ago. Regardless of where you're starting, I will tell you there are thousands of other families exactly where you are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just going to say the very first meeting to your question is really what we call a discovery conversation because our job in that first meeting is to really understand your family and what's the journey that you've been on. What have you been working through and what do you see the next 1 to 3 years of life really looking like? Like what's in the immediate foreground? And I typically do very little talking in that meeting because it's a lot of asking questions and taking just copious notes and listening. And then we'll try to stretch and talk about what 3 to 10 years looks like. And that's where I can kind of help put context because a lot of times when I meet with clients, thinking 1 to 3 years is about as far as they've had the capacity to. And we just kind of hypothetically then talk about, okay, 3 to 10 years. If that means your child is now past the age of 22, are they still living with you in this magical future that we know is hard to plan for because we have no idea what curveballs are coming between now and then? And we face so many curveballs that our natural reaction is to think, well, regardless of what I say, it's going to be different. But there isn't a linear plan. So if we have a target, like if you need self-care and you need day programs at some point, or you need a group home at some point, and you don't even know how much that's going to cost or what the funding streams look like through the county, that's the piece that we talk about when we start stretching out those goals. And we just want to get a feel for where the family's at emotionally, financially, health-wise. And then from there, we may have a second discovery meeting to go more in depth. But the final meeting is really more of the planning discussion where we do a health checkup on the different buckets. Like how on track is the plan for the loved one with a disability? How do we then measure on track for our own financial needs, retirement, needs between now and retirement, and then other children? What does that look like? Are there goals there? Are we thinking about our other kids, or is it hard to think about our other kids because it's like, my one child or my 2 children or my 3 children take up all of the energy because their needs are so high. And that's where we come back and we do some education on what's available and put together kind of a short-term, mid-term, and long-term roadmap that says, here's what we're going to be walking through over the next few years. And here's what our annual or every 6-month review is going to kind of look like. And it's that empowering you to make that first decision that works well for you.
Thank you.
That's amazing.
Super helpful.
I think, like you were saying, it's hard to even look too far ahead because in our shoes, the walk that we all walk with our kids, sometimes a day feels like a month. There's so much going on. The needs are so different. And so it's really hard for me, at least, to kind of look ahead that far and go, "Oh, I can't look that far ahead. There's too much in between now and then." And I think the other thing about our families that's unique, and I know my fear especially, is, we think about the future and who's going to take care of our kids when we're not here anymore. That's like my big fear as a single mom. And I have an ex-husband, of course, but, regardless of our partnership or not, how will our kids be taken care of? And so the financial piece obviously is a big part of that. And so this just sounds like, yeah, an amazing resource just to help you walk through it. And so when I think about some of the resources, could we get it into a few of the technical options? For example, could you tell us a little bit about the ABLE accounts and then the 529 and if that relates to ABLE? And then I would love to hear more about the difference between supplemental needs trusts and special needs trusts. Just, like little short
Yes.
snapshots. Yeah.
Those are really the starting points, right? And it gets confusing. Terminology and acronyms and the amount of stuff that gets thrown at us once we have a diagnosis is so much. And the financial world is not any different. And there's a lot of mixed information out there. So an ABLE account is really commonly talked about, but misunderstood. So what it is a special savings program for qualified individuals. And the qualified individual is someone who is determined to be disabled by the Social Security Administration, or there is a special letter that you can have a physician sign where the physician certifies that your loved one meets the qualifications to have an ABLE account. There's 2 pathways to get there, but it's a very specific letter and it is available on the national resource page for ABLE accounts.
Okay. So if you qualify for one of those, then you can open an account for your child.
Then you can open an account. And these accounts are very special and unique to the disability community. It is important to know that the disability has to have been onset prior to the age of 26 to use one of these accounts, but they work kind of like an HSA account. So it is a savings account in the name of the loved one with a disability, but it doesn't count against their ability to access supplemental security income, or SSI, which is a monthly government benefit that helps them cover the cost of living and expenses with a disability. Plus, there are certain things that they call countable assets. So if you have too many countable assets, it's not even just dollars in a savings account, it's countable assets can't add up to $2,000. And they do allow families to have the home they live in, as long as they live there, and one car that they use for transportation. And those do not count as countable assets. So in addition to having the $2,000, you also can have your residence that you live in and one car. And then there's a long list on the Social Security Administration's website of other things. So there's a lot of math and things that go into this, but for the 30,000-foot entry-level view, $2,000 in countable assets if you are single and $3,000 if you are a couple.
So if you're saying somebody wants to give my child a gift,
Yeah.
then that would go into the ABLE account
Yes.
as an option.
Exactly. Okay. They can give the money to the ABLE account or a supplemental needs trust, which we'll get to in just a second. So an ABLE account has some limits that I want to highlight so listeners at least know the basics. You can set aside $19,000 a year, and you can hold up to $100,000 in the account, and it doesn't count against the supplemental security or SSI limit. If it goes above that in a year or above the total amount in the account, then it does start to count against them. So you have to watch and manage it very closely. And if you take money out, you cannot put new money in the same year. It's $19,000 total, regardless of what you've spent.
Oh, wow. Interesting. Okay.
And the funds have to be used for quality of life. And there are some restrictions on how those dollars can be spent. Like you can't just take money out and keep it. You have to spend it directly with the vendor. And so I actually recommend clients open it directly through their state, because typically the state plan is easier to use and there's a debit card right with the account. So you can make those purchases easily.
That's
Now,
great. Wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
The supplemental needs trust is what they call a third party trust, which means the loved one with a disability is the first party and everyone else is the third party. So if I had a disability as Genevieve Cornish, I could not put my own money or assets into that trust. It doesn't work for me.
Okay.
And it's very important. So if I inherit money directly on accident because grandma was saving money in an account for me or had a piece of land that she split up between all the grandkids, I can't have that in my name, but I can't put that in a supplemental needs trust because it's not for me. It's not a first party trust,
Okay.
right? That's where a special needs trust comes in. That's my trust as the disabled individual. So if I accidentally come into money, I will work with my attorney and the court system to very quickly funnel that into a special needs trust. Or if I'm part of a disability lawsuit and I have a claim that's issued to me, something along those lines, that money goes into the special needs trust, my trust, to get it out of my name because it's owned then and in the name of the trust.
Okay. So does that
Yeah.
money though count against Social Security or not?
No.
It's totally different.
It
Okay.
does
So that's a way
not.
to protect. Okay.
Right. Because it's considered an irrevocable trust, which is a fancy term that means I don't own it. The trust owns it. And so it's in the trust name, and the corporate trustee has to administer those dollars out of the trust based on how the plan is written for the trust. That's where that estate attorney comes in and why you need such an amazing team. And ideally, I would know as the financial advisor who all the team members are so I can help coordinate these discussions and make sure we're all on the same page. And there are gaps should anything happen.
Wow. It's very complicated and you definitely need professionals to help you because there's just so many layers and so many different areas to fill, but this is really helpful.
So this discovery meeting, are they free? How does that work?
Some advisors out there do charge planning fees,
Mm-hmm.
and I've seen them range anywhere from $2,500 to $10,000. And some advisors out there don't. I am one that does not charge a fee to work with me. So we do a discovery meeting, we write the plan as intellectual capital, and then we decide, do we trust each other enough to take action on that plan? And where I can help through an investment account or an insurance policy or an annuity or whatever it is that, our program brings to the table, I get paid through that. But the plan takes into account everything you're doing. The ABLE account, your 401k at work, your savings accounts, what grandma's putting aside or grandpa's set aside. We take into account everything. So there is no fee.
That's a huge call out because I think the fear is the cost, right? I think what I've learned already in this short time frame with you is that I need to rework my entire team because I was doing it from somebody who I thought, all right, they know what they're doing, got a recommendation, but they really didn't understand what a disabled person needs to get their benefits. In my case, my mother-in-law, she did this for all the grandkids. She started setting up a 529 once they were born to help them with their college funds. So then once we discovered Sadie doesn't have the pathway to college, she's intellectually disabled. And so college is not in her future. And so that's when I started to take some webinars about ABLE accounts. And I think that's still even 100,000 feet level knowledge. And so then I was like, all right, well, we got to roll that 529 into the ABLE account. So that 529 was already opened with a team, not realizing I need to ask more questions. So the ABLE account is for people who have medically complex children. I sometimes worry what happens if she dies and I have all this money in her ABLE account and I haven't spent it. Can you talk a little bit about it or who we would contact in your team to help us with that discussion?
Yeah. So one thing is ABLE accounts are slightly different state to state. So here in Minnesota, you have to prepay burial expenses out of the ABLE account if you plan to use those dollars as part of end of life services. In other states, you can use the money for that before the government can carve it back. So if you receive certain types of government benefits already from the state, there's a carve back clause. And it's changing state by state. There's a big movement to get rid of the carve back clause, but right now there's a carve back clause that says dollars left in the ABLE account after the passing of the loved one with a disability can be taken back by the state to refund themselves for any dollars that have been paid out to the family previously. So planning around those dollars and what you want left is important. The supplemental needs trust does not have a carve back. So that money, if the loved one with a disability passes the way it is today, caveat, right? These things change often, but the way it is today,
Right.
is that money can be passed on to other family members or charitable giving or whatever the wishes are of the family in a supplemental needs trust. The other account that can also be carved back is that special needs trust, that first party trust where I put money in.
Mm-hmm.
So some people, if they have a transactional relationship with their financial advisor, they maybe don't see the need to meet regularly. These are the reasons why I think annual meetings and keeping that relationship ongoing, even if it feels like, oh, one more appointment in the year, are so important because those things do change. And we want to watch over time how those funds are being used and how much is left in the accounts so that we can take appropriate action, especially if you are in a phase where your child may not outlive you and you want to make sure that you're making smart decisions with those funds and any leftover funds.
That's so helpful.
So, Genevieve, does drafting a will replace the need for a trust? Is that necessary?
This is a question that I highly recommend asking your attorney partner. However, I can answer it in a general sense. So,
Okay.
with regards to special needs planning, no, drafting a will does not replace the need for a trust. They're both needed. And the reason is the trust is needed to house the assets and protect access to government benefits for the loved one with a disability. You may or may not want an additional trust that's for the family separately and other loved ones in the family, but your attorney will help you make that decision. But you do, for special needs planning, still want the supplemental needs trust at a minimum. And the will give you direction on the estate more broadly, as there may be other children, pets, property that need separate planning. So because it's not an end all be all for the whole family's journey, you still want the supplemental needs trust in addition to both. So you should do both.
Okay, great.
So, Genevieve, I think we could probably do several episodes because it is so nuanced. But I will say, in the short time that we've had you, I've learned a lot. And I think the first step is just to make the call and not to be afraid. And I will say, having been in some of these other different calls that I've had with my team, is that you guys set the agenda. So it's not like you're going into the meeting blind. So thank you, Genevieve, for sharing your time with us and expertise and thoughts around financial planning to help our families with children who have loved ones that have disabilities today. It was so good to learn about this financial planning discussion and what a team should look like to help us in this community. And we know that this topic will help so many more people. So thank you so much for coming and being with us today.
Oh, thank you so much for having me. It's such an honor to meet other parents and get a chance to tell our stories.
If you liked today's topic or have comments, questions, or thoughts on what else you would like us to cover, please visit rarelyfamiliar.com or connect with us on all the social channels. Resources will be listed in our show notes, and we'll be back next time with another discussion around living life successfully with rare medical complexities. Thanks for joining us on the journey.